Welcome to the SecureWorld Sessions. We're a cybersecurity podcast that is all about access. Access to people and ideas that can impact your personal cybersecurity career and help you secure your organization. Hello there. My name is Bruce Sussman, and I'm Director of Content at SecureWorld and also your podcast host. Hope you're having a great day. And in today's session, we are going to be exploring the two faces of artificial intelligence. Which parts of artificial intelligence could be a home run for humanity? And which parts are setting off alarms, saying danger, danger ahead? Before we dive into the two faces of AI, don't you think we should probably define it? I mean, what is artificial intelligence? Luckily, there's a new definition now. Annie Cyril is a senior lecturer on AI at the University of Washington, and I interviewed her at SecureWorld Seattle the day after that new definition of AI was announced. I'll let her explain it.
It's from a commission called the National Security Commission on AI, and it's an interim report that they published yesterday. The definition is human-like or better than human performance by analyzing large quantities of data, identifying patterns, performing massive searches for answers, assessments, and recommendations.
Wow, so that seems...
It shows how it works. It's much more a working definition.
Yeah, so a working definition of AI, that is actually helpful. But I'm not sure what you think of how it sounds. Maybe hopeful and a little scary when you hear the terms human-like or better than human performance. But how can we get a big picture view on the major upheaval that artificial intelligence is about to cause in our lives? I mean, how does it actually look or work? What might it feel like? Well, I interviewed Steve Brown, who calls himself the Bald Futurist, following his keynote at SecureWorld Bay Area. His talk, it's fascinating. Anyway, he calls AI the second coming of computing. And listen to his big picture explanation of the possibilities.
So AI is getting a lot of play right now, and I think quite rightly so. There's a lot of hype around it, but there's hype for a reason. For about the last 60 years, and really hitting in the last 30 years, we've been living in the era of the digital computer. And it's great computing, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, the internet, video games, wonderful. AI is a completely different kind of computing. Instead of running programs, you train an AI, and it is able to solve a completely different set of problems than traditional digital computers. So people are using this technology to enable computers to see, hear, and understand the world, to enable us to talk to computers much more naturally, to find important patterns inside oceans of data, to help us discover new materials, new drugs, to build computers that can learn by doing, and starting to build computers that can imagine, have an imagination, and create content for the first time. So creating images, creating videos, creating prose, writing reports for us. So we're moving to a new era with a completely new type of computing that is going to enable us to solve a whole new set of business problems, and that's why it's so fascinating. So we are setting ourselves up for the next 60 years of innovation in computing.
Steve Brown also told me during our interview, and I'm quoting here, every business, in the same way they had to have a digital strategy starting in the 1980s, we're going to have to do it again. What is my human-machine partnership strategy? What is my voice platform strategy? AI is not just another flavor of computing. It is the second coming of computing, and it will change everything about the way your business operates. When I hear things like that, it's just mind-blowing. And one of the things he talked about is that we will soon have work teams made up of humans and AI, where AI is no longer a tool. It will operate a lot like Julie or Joe in the next cubicle. It will be a teammate, a partner in moving objectives forward. Now that's one face of AI, right? Smiling, helpful, solving problems we've never been able to solve. But AI ethicist Craig Spiezle has questions about the potential dark side of AI. He's a managing partner at AgeLight Digital Trust Advisory Group, and I interviewed him at SecureWorld Denver after he spoke on the hunt for ethical AI.
Well, ethics are not a new thing for technology. I think what's changing, and what I suggest risking creating a snowball effect, is the vast amount of new devices that are collecting data, like IoT, technology that's more and more data in absolute size being collected, and the computing power. And as we apply AI, or algorithms, heuristics to it, however you want to call it, what are the results? And are there biases in our technology and our approaches that could have unintended consequences?
And what do we need to be looking for then? Those are some of the big picture items. And maybe unpack a little bit. What are some of the concerns, or what's a concern that you have?
A lot of it's really the unintended. We think about all this great innovation. A good example today, this week, was companies have come out and talked about they have new facial recognition capabilities that can interpret sign language. Well, that can be a great enabler for the hearing impaired community. But it's also become one of crossing a line for others that want to have a conversation in private. So we think about that. So there's an evolution of facial recognition, AI being played on top of it. There's multitude of other scenarios, again, how technology, Amazon and University of Washington have come up with some technology that with AI that can detect when someone's having a heart attack based on their sleeping patterns and noise in the bedroom. That can be great if you're impaired, but that means those speakers are on all the time. What other information and how is that being used? And more importantly, is it transparent to the consumer or the user of the business of the use, and is it being used or potentially exploited for other areas? And that becomes the ethical question.
And what about, I'm thinking about security, and how for a long time with the advent of the IoT, security leaders said we need security built into the IoT instead of just innovation. And now you're talking about ethics being built into AI. How do we get to that point where we start getting AI developers to think about this?
Right. So actually, taking a step back, we've talked about security by design. We've talked about privacy by design. We should have ethics by design. And ethics should be just like security. Security is no longer just to that group over here, the security group. Everyone's job is security. And everyone's job is also to question the ethics. Is this the intended use of our technology? What could happen if it goes wrong? And we need to ask those same questions, just like doing a security risk assessment of a product. How could this be compromised? So by taking a step back, we need to do that. That's the first part. The second part, we need to empower employees to be able to raise those concerns.
And which employees are on the front lines of this ethical AI fight? The University of Washington's Cyril says it should be you.
Really, people in the profession, especially in security and risk, are going to have to step up and really start speaking out, both at the development level where products are being researched and created, and then at the level inside a corporation where, say, the CEO it's recommended that he add a product. And then how does the CEO determine whether that product will do harm or good?
We'll learn some of her specific concerns as our interview continues in a moment. And we'll also hear from someone who says the mix of cloud, the Internet of Things, and AI is a lethal combination when it comes to legal risk for organizations. That is coming up. Now, we've already heard about AI and how it's changing everything. The good news is it should, and in some cases already is, power some incredible cybersecurity solutions. But I was also intrigued by a blog post done by the Trend Micro team on the use of counter AI and machine learning. It focuses on a new era of cybercriminal that will weaponize these tools. The highlights of that post are today's Trend Micro Top 3. Number 1, malicious actors will look to artificial intelligence and machine learning to develop more sophisticated threats. Deepfakes, of course, are one example, but also tools to guess high-quality and sophisticated passwords. There are already some cases of this happening. Number 2, adversarial AI will be developed to hide threats or confuse the same technologies used to detect them. One thing researchers have seen so far is malware being disguised within a benign data payload. It's a glimpse of sophisticated attacks coming our way in the future. And number 3, Trend Micro says enhancing monitoring and also data analysis solutions is a step in the right direction when it comes to detecting and blocking sophisticated threats such as those powered by machine learning. Now, I'm putting a link to the Trend Micro report in the show notes. It's a thought-provoking read with some real-world examples, so check it out. And thanks again to Trend Micro for being our premier podcast partner. Now, let's continue with our interview. We're talking to University of Washington senior lecturer Annie Cyril about the two faces of artificial intelligence. And that was actually the title of her session at the 19th annual SecureWorld Seattle. Let's go back to the conference. So as you were talking about the two faces of artificial intelligence, can you give us an idea what you mean by that? How do you see the two faces?
I think the positive face, the beneficent side of AI, has to do with ease of use, convenience, the ability to perform socially good kinds of tasks. You could use the same kinds of tools that Alexa offers for ordering up a radio channel or ordering a product on Amazon. You could program Alexa to, for instance, remind a senile person through a kind of slideshow you'd put together of relatives to play certain times, maybe once an hour, and to run through the pictures. And it would be an attempt to help the person with dementia remember who people were. That's a beneficent, benevolent use of AI. Then you have, and this, I'll sort of do the least controversial ones first. You have digital assistants like Alexa or Siri. And while we all thought when we bought Alexa, if we bought it, that Alexa would be listening so that it could fulfill our request. We find now that Alexa is not only listening, but Alexa is recording and saving the data. We know that because it's been subpoenaed in court under certain conditions in Arkansas and other places.
Wow.
For evidence of domestic abuse, arguments heard to establish whether or not a person was in the home at the time something happened. So that, and perhaps in the small print, Amazon told us all along that Alexa was collecting the data, that the data would be anonymized and would not be used for any other purpose. But clearly the data is searchable. It's not anonymized. So that's a lower level one. Then you go to China for the worst abuse, shall we say. The worst case I can make is the social credit system that the government has now established under Chairman Xi. And the social credit system pulls all data from all sources, public or private in China. So it could be a traffic ticket that you have. It could be your paycheck. It could be purchase of a car, any purchases you make on Alibaba, or it could be a record of your activity on WeChat. It could be all of those kinds of things aggregated into a single database about you, and you are given points positive, or points are taken away for certain types of behavior. So if you jaywalked and the CCTV cameras caught you, points would be taken away. other kinds of things. You can earn points. What do you do with the points? Why is that important? Because the government is controlling what you can do. If you get sufficient points, perhaps you can buy a plane ticket and take a vacation in another country. Perhaps you can buy a bigger home. Perhaps you can send your child to a better school.
Wow.
And similarly, negative things happen if the points go the other way. So it is complete control of all data about you in order to incent certain types of behavior. You know, don't underestimate the race with China on this, because it is a race for rather complete forms of power. And I don't just mean in a military sense. So much of what is behind the scenes will govern how societies work and how decisions are made, and probably whether democracy survives. I mean, I think I'm really very serious about that. You've seen you've seen the attempts for the video, for instance, the fake video of President Obama speaking, right, where words were put into his mouth.
Yes, the deep fake.
That's a form of AI. And disinformation is something that right now we're seeing in our election process. And we're struggling hard. I mean, is it the job of a technology company to do the heavy lifting and be the censor of inappropriate uses of AI, for example?
Well, that is a great question, isn't it? I mean, whose job is it to make sure AI is used ethically? I don't think we have an answer to that right now. And we also don't know about the liability your organization might be taking on as you adopt AI. In fact, very few are talking about this at all, but Dr. Raj Sachdev is. I interviewed him at SecureWorld Chicago after he spoke about his dissertation for Oxford University. Listen as he explores the legal unknowns that come from a combination of technologies, and factoring in is artificial intelligence.
So the law is very slow, and the technology is very fast. That's nothing new, but essentially it's evolving because the technologies are ever so evolving. So in the area of cloud security, being that it appears that there's much more reliance on the cloud now by small and large businesses, and then mixing in the artificial intelligence piece to that, and then accessing all that through various IoT, these three areas join together to create a lethal combination to which the law cannot keep up. So there are some laws. We talk about GDPR. We talk about California's privacy legislation. We talk about, trying to comply with various state, federal, and international laws and regulations, all of which are slow and some of which are trying to kind of keep pace. So, they come in like GDPR, talk a little bit about automated stuff, throw that into the law, sounds great. We're ahead of the game, but it's never the case. So this lethal combination involves potential liability to many actors, organizations, consumers, and all those suppliers, third party. It's not even third party anymore. It's a web of parties. And that web is creating a very complicated environment. And then finally add to that the AI piece where machine learning is taking place, and then who becomes the actor at that stage.
And there is another great question about artificial intelligence that still needs to be answered. Can you imagine the defense in court? It wasn't our organization. It was the artificial intelligence. It did it on its own. Well, that's going to be interesting. I'm sure our lawyers will help us sort through all of that in the coming years. Well, I want to say thank you so much to each of our experts on the show today. Weren't they great? Let me know if this show triggered any other thoughts on the topic for you. Would love to hear about it. My address is media@secureworldexpo.com. That is media@secureworldexpo.com. Also, I'm not going to play this part of the interview, but I like to ask the question. And I did ask University of Washington's Annie Cyril why she takes time to be a part of SecureWorld Seattle, where she's on the advisory council. And this was her response. It's a very valuable forum. I think you get such a great mix of people in government and the private sector and in academia, so I wouldn't miss it. Thank you, Annie, for that review. And if you've never been to a Secure World conference before, check the show notes and find the one in your region. I've got the entire 2020 calendar up. It's linked in the show notes. And Secure World's mission, by the way, is connecting, informing, and developing leaders in cybersecurity. Thank you for listening, because you are now part of that mission. And I have to give a quick shout out to Pete from the Secure World team. He does an awesome job editing this podcast. Believe it or not, these episodes do not edit themselves, and AI does not edit them either. It's HI, human intelligence. So thanks, Pete. And now let's talk about next Tuesday. We are talking to the man who was fired after the Equifax mega breach. His team had the responsibility for the vulnerability that hackers took advantage of. What was that like for him? What was it like in the incident response stages? That is coming up on Tuesday. On behalf of the Secure World team, I'm Bruce Sussman, your host of the Secure World Sessions, and we'll catch up again on the next episode.